Forged, the ancient science of building a body and mind that cannot be broken, by Dr. Harshajyoti Das, Ph.D. Iron does not ask whether today is a good day to be forged. It simply receives the hammer and becomes something that lasts. It is a book about an ancient truth that modern civilization has nearly erased, that the forge and the soul are the same thing, that the hand that grips a tool with full intention is the same hand that builds a life, that the body that trains through exhaustion, through doubt, through the voice that says stop, that body is a spiritual document. What follows draws from warrior traditions studied over decades. The principles are real. The science is real. The transformation available to you is real. His name was F.O.R.G.E. He was not weak. Not by any surface measure. He could perform. He could demonstrate. He could show you every angle, every transition, every refined position of his art with a grace that made other men stop and stare. In the first hour, he was magnificent. In the fourth hour, he was gone. Not dead, not injured, just emptied. His hands couldn't hold. His strikes had no density. The coordination that had looked like mastery at dawn dissolved, like smoke in wind, into slow and desperate motion. His teacher looked at him from across the courtyard, said nothing for a long time, then spoke only this: "You have built a beautiful roof, but there is no house beneath it." F.O.R.G.E trained every morning. He had trained every morning for 7 years. And still, no house. I want you to sit with that, because I think that story lives inside you too. Maybe not in a warrior's courtyard. Maybe in your office, in your relationships, in the quiet moments at 11 o'clock at night, when the discipline you promised yourself at 6 in the morning has entirely dissolved, in the resolution that lasted 4 days. In the version of yourself you can see clearly, intelligently even, but cannot seem to inhabit for longer than a few clean hours. You know what you are capable of. You have glimpsed it. The problem is you cannot sustain it. And that gap between the glimpse and the sustained reality is exactly what this book is about. Tonight you do not need to fix your life. You do not need to solve the problem. You do not need to perform. You only need to listen and allow something ancient to reach you. Or take a slow breath. Relax your shoulders. Release your jaw. Sink deeper. Here is what most people believe about discipline. That it is a matter of motivation. That if you want something badly enough, the body and mind will cooperate. That belief is the comfortable lie, and it is costing you everything. Motivation is weather. It comes, it goes. It has nothing to do with the quality of your character. You cannot build a house on weather. You cannot build a self on the presence or absence of feeling. The warrior traditions understood this with brutal clarity. They did not train when inspired. They trained especially when uninspired, because that was precisely when the real training was happening. Not training of the muscles, training of the self. There is a science beneath this. There is an architecture to human endurance that most modern systems have never touched. And once you understand it, not intellectually, but somatically, in your bones, in your nervous system, something fundamental shifts. You stop trying to feel like doing the things that matter. You simply do them. Because that is who you are. That is what this book installs. Not a routine. An identity. The F.O.R.G.E framework. 5 pillars of the unbreakable self. Every transformation that lasts is built on a framework that outlives motivation. A structure that does not depend on how you feel. A map that works even, especially, in the dark. This is that map. F.O.R.G.E. 5 principles. 5 movements of transformation. 5 layers of who you will become by the time this book is complete. F. Foundation. Before everything, the foundation. The grip, the roots, the unglamorous base upon which all capacity rests. Every warrior tradition began not with striking, not with strategy, but with grip work. Because the hand that cannot hold cannot act. Foundation is the principle that what you cannot sustain under load means nothing. You build the base first. Always. Ossification. Ossification is the principle of earned density, of becoming harder through appropriate stress, of understanding that the body and the self responds to pressure by becoming more. This is not metaphor. This is Wolff's law. This is neural adaptation. This is the science of becoming someone who cannot be easily broken. Repetition. Repetition is not the enemy of growth. It is the mechanism of identity. What you do once is an action. What you do 100 times is a habit. What you do 1,000 times is a character. The warrior's path is not exciting. It is repetitive. Deliberately, intentionally, transformatively repetitive. Repetition rewires the nervous system. Repetition installs identity. G. Grit architecture. Grit is not a personality trait. It is a structure you build deliberately, through progressive overload, physical and psychological, through choosing to continue past the first signal to stop, through designing environments, schedules, and systems that make the difficult choice the only choice. Grit architecture means building the conditions under which your best self is inevitable, not occasional. E. Embodied identity, the final movement, the destination. Identity that lives not just in thought, but in the body, in how you stand, in how you recover, in how you respond when the 4th hour arrives and everything in you says to stop. Embodied identity means your values are not ideas you believe. They are reflexes you have trained. They are the house beneath the roof. These 5 principles are not sequential. They are simultaneous. They build on each other, reinforce each other, deepen each other. By the end of this book, they will be yours. Let us begin. Chapter 1. The Comfortable Lie. There is a story you have been told about strength, that it is genetic, that some people have it and others do not, that the naturally disciplined were simply born that way, wired differently, advantaged from the start. This story is seductive because it absolves you. If strength is genetic, then its absence is not your fault. If discipline is innate, then struggle is simply evidence of your limitations, not your choices. It is a comfortable lie, and it has been building its walls around you for years. The warrior traditions of classical Japan had no word for natural talent when it came to physical cultivation. The concept did not exist in the same way it does in modern culture. What existed was commitment. What existed was the willingness to show up before sunrise, to hold the ishi until the wrists burned, to strike the makiwara until the hands were raw. Not because it felt meaningful in the moment, but because the teacher had said, "This is the path," and the student trusted that, not blindly, not without understanding, but with a kind of faith in process that the modern world has entirely forgotten. We want results before effort. We want transformation before discomfort. We want the 4th hour without the first 3, and when the body refuses, when the coordination collapses, when the endurance runs dry, when the thing we practiced in comfortable conditions disintegrates under real pressure. We call it failure, when actually it is information. It is the house telling you, you have not built me yet. Take a slow breath. Relax your shoulders. Release your jaw. Sink deeper. Let me tell you about a man named Viren. Viren was what anyone would call exceptional, brilliant in his field, respected by his peers. He had, in every observable way, built a successful life. He had studied hard, worked hard, optimized relentlessly. But there was a gap, and he felt it every day. A kind of hollow urgency, a sense that beneath the performance, beneath the credentials and the competence, there was no real ground. That if something truly tested him, not professionally, but physically, existentially, at the level of raw endurance, he would come apart. He came to understand this gap through a single experience. He had been invited to join a group of practitioners doing a traditional physical endurance session. 6 hours. Old tools, no modern equipment, just weight, repetition, and the slow passage of time. He lasted 90 minutes. Not because he was injured, not because he was asked to leave. Because he simply could not make himself continue past the voice that said, "This is not comfortable." He drove home in silence, sat in the parking lot of his apartment building for 40 minutes, and thought about all the other places in his life where that voice had won. That moment, he said later, was the beginning of an entirely different life. Not because he decided to get fit. Because he decided to build a house. The comfortable lie is not only about the body. It is about everything. Every place in your life where you have accepted a ceiling. Because examining that ceiling would require confronting the voice that says, "This is not comfortable." That voice has a name in behavioral psychology. It is the pain avoidance reflex. It is ancient, biological, and extraordinarily efficient. It kept your ancestors alive. In a world of actual physical danger, flinching was wisdom. But you do not live in that world. You live in a world where the most important battles are exactly the ones that require you not to flinch. The battle to hold the standard when it's easier to lower it. The battle to continue when quitting is invisible. The battle to build, day after day, without applause, without confirmation, without the feedback of immediate results. These battles are won or lost entirely in the internal architecture. In the relationship between you and the voice that says stop. That relationship is what this book rebuilds. Not your routine, not your schedule, not your habits, your relationship with stopping. Because when you change that, everything else changes with it. Your mind is already listening. Let this truth settle into it like stone into deep water, heavy, permanent, slow. The next chapter will take you deeper into the science of what actually happens when you push past that voice. What the body is doing, what the nervous system is building, why the discomfort is not the obstacle. It is the instruction. Chapter 2. What fatigue is really telling you. You think you know what fatigue is. You don't. What you call fatigue. That burning, that urge to stop, that overwhelming signal from your body that says enough, is not the edge of your capacity. In almost all cases, it is not even close. What it actually is a negotiation. Your nervous system, watching the energy expenditure, watching the accumulation of metabolic byproducts, makes a calculation. It sends a signal. And that signal is not you are at your limit. That signal is continuing will cost more than I have pre-approved. The brain is conservative by evolutionary design. It reserves. It protects. It limits output not to the edge of your capacity, but to a point it considers safe given its current risk model, which means the feeling of fatigue, the burning, the urge to stop, is not a wall. It is a gate. And you hold the key. Take a slow breath. Relax your shoulders. Release your jaw. Sink deeper. And this was understood, in practice if not in neuroscientific language, by every serious warrior tradition in human history. The systematic conditioning methods of classical martial preparation. What the Okinawan tradition called hojo undo, or supplementary training, were not designed to build muscle in the modern gym sense. They were designed to reprogram the gate, to teach the nervous system a new risk model, to expand what the body considered its safe operating range until that range encompassed territory most humans never approach. Think about what that means for a moment. Real adaptation, not performance, not aesthetics, not the surface metrics we now associate with fitness. Actual rewiring of the neural pathways governing fatigue, of the threshold at which the gate closes, of the relationship between effort and the internal sense of what is survivable. This is what the research on neuromuscular fatigue now confirms. The depletion of cellular energy, ATP, does not cause failure by itself. What causes the collapse of coordination and force output is the nervous system's response to that depletion. The motor unit recruitment patterns deteriorate. The timing breaks down. The body stops firing efficiently, not because it is physically impossible to continue, but because the central governor, Tim Noakes's term for this conservative brain mechanism, has decided to protect you. The warrior's insight. If you train consistently at the edge of that gate, the gate moves. You are not born with a fixed capacity for endurance. You are born with a nervous system that can be taught what endurance means. I want to tell you about a specific kind of training moment. You have probably experienced it, though you may not have had language for it. It is the moment, approximately 40 seconds after you have passed the first wave of wanting to stop, when something shifts. The burning does not stop, but something in the relationship to the burning changes. It is as if you and the sensation are no longer adversaries, as if you have moved into a different room inside yourself. Quieter, deeper, strangely calm. Athletes call this second wind. Meditators call it equanimity. The ancient traditions had many names for it, but they all pointed to the same phenomenon, the self that lives past the gate. The self that exists on the other side of what you thought was the edge. This self is not different from you. It is more you. It is the self that has not been edited by comfort. The uncompressed version, the person you actually are when the habit of avoidance has nothing left to work with. That self is who this book is building toward, not through one transformative moment, through daily encounters with the gate, through choosing, again and again, to pass through it and allowing the gate to move, one day at a time, one session at a time. One breath past the burning at a time. Your nervous system is listening. It is taking notes. Every time you continue when the gate says stop, you are writing a new instruction set for who you are under pressure. You are building the house. Let's now go deeper into how. Chapter 3. The Foundation, Grip, and the Roots of Will. F. Foundation. There is a reason every serious warrior tradition began training with the hands. Not for aesthetics, not even primarily for practical combat function, because the grip is the first honest conversation between the will and the world. Everything else you can fake, your posture, your expression, your tone of voice, the stories you tell yourself about your readiness and your discipline. But when you pick up something heavy and hold it past the burning, the grip tells the truth. The chi ishi was a stone weight attached to a short wooden handle used by generations of martial practitioners for exactly this purpose, not to build large forearms, not to impress anyone, to develop what the Okinawan masters called kaim, strength, the ability to deliver force at the precise moment of contact, and to maintain that capacity across the full duration of a real engagement. The training was simple, brutal, transformative. You held the stone, you twisted it. You continued past the burning. You twisted again. You did this for the same reason every morning that you do anything deeply important. Not because it felt meaningful in the moment, but because the practice itself was the meaning. Here, take a slow breath. Relax your shoulders. Release your jaw. Sink deeper. Modern research on grip strength is revealing something extraordinary. Of all the measurable physical indicators, grip strength correlates more strongly with all-cause mortality, cardiovascular health, and systemic fatigue resistance than almost any other single metric. More than cardiovascular capacity, more than body composition, more than flexibility or explosive power. Grip strength is a primary predictor of how long and how well you live. Think about what that means. The hand that holds. The hand that does not let go. That simple, unglamorous, deeply stubborn act of holding. It is, according to the data, one of the most significant things a human body can do for its longevity. But this is not just physiology. This is philosophy made physical, because grip strength, measured in the laboratory, is also grip strength measured in life. The same neural patterns that allow you to hold a weighted implement past the burning are the patterns that allow you to hold your commitments past the inconvenience, to hold your standards past the temptation to lower them, to hold your direction past the moment of doubt. The grip is not a metaphor for will. The grip is will, made visible, made trainable, made real. A foundational truth of this entire framework. You do not build discipline by trying to feel disciplined. You build discipline by building the physical systems that discipline requires. And the foundation of all those systems is the capacity to hold position under fatigue, to hold a standard when lowering it would be easier, to hold the identity you are building when the old identity pulls. This is why grip work is not supplementary training. It is primary training. It is identity training made concrete. The practice begins simply. Every morning, something heavy. Hold it, twist it, hold it longer, hold it past the voice, then hold it a little longer still. This is not about specific weights or specific implements. It is about the daily practice of choosing the hand that does not open when told to. Day 1, you are learning a skill. Day 30, you are building a habit. Day 100, you are installing an identity. The grip is where it begins, and what begins in the hand travels upward, into the arm, into the shoulder, into the character, into the life. Let this sink into you, into the body, not just the mind. Your nervous system is beginning to remember who you have always had the capacity to be. Chapter 4. The Law of the Hammer, Impact and Bone. O. Ossification. There is a law in physiology called Wolff's Law. Julius Wolff articulated it in the 19th century, but warrior practitioners had been living it for 1,000 years before he put a name to it. The law is this: bone adapts to the loads placed upon it. Damage from progressive impact stimulates osteoblast activity, the building of new bone tissue. The result, over months of consistent practice, is measurably denser, harder, more fracture-resistant bone. In combat terms, hands that had struck the Makiwara 10,000 times would not break on impact. Hands that had not would. The implication extends far beyond combat. The human body, at its most fundamental level, is not a static structure. It is a dynamic response to demand. Every system, muscular, skeletal, neural, metabolic, strengthens in response to appropriate stress and atrophies in the absence of it. You were designed to be stressed. You were designed to be loaded. You were designed to be forged. The problem is not that modern life is too hard. The problem is that in most of its important dimensions, modern life is not hard enough. Take a slow breath. Relax your shoulders. Release your jaw. Sink deeper. The Makiwara was a padded striking post. Not sophisticated, not expensive, not requiring any particular athletic gift to use. What it required was willingness to begin small and stay consistent. The practitioner did not begin with 1,000 strikes. They began with 200 light strikes. Careful, controlled, building gradually over weeks and months as the tissue adapted. 200 became 400. 400 became 700. 700 became 1,000. And what emerged was not just stronger hands. What emerged was a different relationship to impact itself. The psychological knowledge held in the body, not just the mind, that you have been struck repeatedly and remained. That you have delivered force into resistance thousands of times, and the resistance did not break you. That knowledge changes something. It changes the way you stand, the way you enter a room, the way you respond when life delivers impact, when the project fails, when the relationship fractures, when the thing you built is struck. You have been to the Makiwara. You know you can take the hit. You know you will remain. The principle of ossification applies beyond bone. Your beliefs undergo the same process. Your identity undergoes the same process. Every time you hold your standard under pressure, you are adding density to your character. Every time you do the thing you said you would do despite every internal argument for not doing it, you are striking the Makiwara of your own psychology. Micro-damage, repair, density. You become harder to break, not in the sense of cold or closed, in the sense of having more structural integrity, more resistance to the impact of circumstance, more ability to absorb what life delivers and transmit force back. Clean, directed, full. This is the second pillar of the F.O.R.G.E. framework. You are not trying to avoid being hit. You are building the capacity to receive impact and remain yourself. The warrior does not fear the strike. The warrior trains for the strike, because the warrior knows what has been struck 10,000 times and remained cannot be broken by one. Begin small. Begin now. Build density. Your identity is already beginning to harden into something that lasts. Chapter 5. Shoulders that remember. R. Repetition. There is a concept in motor learning called procedural memory. It is the memory that lives not in the hippocampus, not in the narrative, constructing language using part of your mind, but in the cerebellum, the basal ganglia, the deep neural architecture of practiced movement. It is the memory that allows a skilled pianist to play a passage they have not touched in 20 years. The memory that allows a craftsman to resume a motion they have not performed in a decade and find it already waiting in their hands. Procedural memory is slower to build than declarative memory. It takes more repetition, more consistency, more patient accumulation, but it is infinitely more durable. And it does not live in the mind. It lives in the body. This is what the traditional warrior understood about the tetsubo, the heavy wooden or iron staff used for shoulder and full body endurance conditioning. The practitioner did not swing the tetsubo for cardiovascular output. They swung it for repetition. For the patient, systematic installation of movement patterns into the deep neural architecture. For building shoulders that did not just have the strength to keep the weapon raised, but the memory to keep it raised. Hour after hour, past the burning, past the doubt, into the fourth hour of real engagement when every unconditioned warrior's shoulders had long since failed. Shoulders that remembered. Hey, take a slow breath, relax your shoulders, release your jaw, sink deeper. Hin, consider the difference between knowing something and having it in your body. You can know, intellectually, exactly how to stay calm under pressure. You can have read every book on emotional regulation, studied every breathing protocol, understand the neuroscience of the stress response down to the level of the amygdala and the vagus nerve. And still, in the actual moment of pressure, when the cortisol rises and the heart accelerates, and the voice inside says react, reach, defend. The intellectual knowledge often does not reach the body in time, because it was never installed in the body. It was installed in the mind. The warrior's practice recognized this with extraordinary precision. Technique was always secondary to conditioning, not because technique was unimportant, but because technique without the physical foundation to sustain it is theoretical. The kata performed with a 40-pound weight, not to develop strength in isolation, to install the movement patterns so deeply into the body that they functioned without conscious management, so that in the fourth hour, when the conscious mind was exhausted and the technique wanted to dissolve, the body remembered. Repetition rewires identity. This is not metaphor. This is neuroscience. Every time you perform a behavior, you are myelinating the neural pathway that supports it. Myelin, the fatty sheath that wraps nerve fibers, thickens with use, increasing the speed and efficiency of the signal. What you repeat becomes, literally, who you are at the level of neural architecture. This means you are always in the process of becoming what you repeatedly do. Not what you intend to do. Not what you believe about yourself. Not what you were once. What you repeatedly do. The shoulders remember because they have been asked the same question, in the same way, enough times that the question and the answer have become one continuous motion. What question are you asking your life to remember? What are you making your character practice? Because it is practicing something. Right now, every choice you make, every pattern you run, every time you continue or stop, you are deepening pathways. The only question is, which ones? Choose the ones that build shoulders that remember. Choose the ones that install in the body the truth you want to live. Your nervous system is already taking the instruction. Chapter 6. The weight of who you are. G. Grit architecture. Let us talk about weight. Not metaphorical weight. Real weight. The weight of something heavy in your hands that demands everything you have, and then demands a little more. The classical warrior traditions used heavy stones, heavy ropes, implements that resisted, that pushed back, that did not care about your intentions or your mood or the story you had told yourself before you arrived. They used these things not because they were primitive, but because they were honest. A heavy stone does not adjust for how you feel. It does not scale to your confidence. It does not reward your narrative about how hard you are working. It simply is what it is, and you either move it or you do not. In a world saturated with systems designed to reduce friction, to personalize, to make the difficult slightly less difficult, there is something quietly extraordinary about a thing that simply refuses to be made easier. Something that says this is the weight, meet it or do not. That encounter, repeated daily, over weeks, over months, builds something that cannot be built any other way. The architecture of grit. Take a slow breath. Relax your shoulders. Release your jaw. Sink deeper. Grit, as the research consistently shows, is not a personality trait you either have or lack. It is a structure. A constructed internal architecture made up of multiple supporting elements. The first element, a long-term goal that is genuinely yours. Not borrowed from someone else's vision. Not assigned by culture's expectations. Yours. Something you are building across years, not weeks. Something for which short-term discomfort is not a cost, but an investment. The second element, a practice of consistent effort that you have engaged in long enough to trust. Not motivation, not excitement. Trust. The earned confidence that comes from having done the thing when you did not feel like it, and having found on the other side that you were capable. The third element, the ability to reframe setback. Not to deny it, not to perform positivity about it, but to hold it within a larger story. To say this difficulty is part of the forge. This is not evidence that I am failing. This is evidence that I am being shaped. The fourth element, this is the one most training systems miss. What I call environmental architecture. The deliberate design of your physical, social, and temporal environment to make your best behavior the path of least resistance. Because grit is not infinite. Willpower is a resource. Decision fatigue is real. The warrior who has designed their environment to remove unnecessary friction does not need to call on grit for small things. They conserve it. They deploy it precisely for the moments when it genuinely matters. The weight makes you honest when you are under real load, physical load, the load that actually requires your full present attention. There is no space for performance. No room for the story of yourself. You are simply here, under this weight, continuing or not continuing. That simplicity is medicine. In a life full of complexity, ambiguity, social performance, and narrative management, the daily encounter with real weight offers a clarity that almost nothing else provides. You find out who you are under load, and then, this is the critical part, you train to be someone better under the same load tomorrow, not by trying harder, by building the architecture that makes better behavior structurally easier. The path becomes the path. The weight becomes familiar. The familiar becomes strength. This is grit architecture. This is the Forge. Chapter 7. Systems, not moods. Here is the most dangerous sentence in modern productivity culture. I'll do it when I feel ready. Read that again. Feel the comfort in it. The reasonableness. The gentle postponement that sounds like wisdom. Now understand, that sentence has ended more potential lives than any specific failure ever has. Because readiness is not a feeling you wait for. It is a state you create. Through structure. Through commitment. Through the refusal to make your action dependent on your mood. The warriors who trained through the method described in this book did not train when inspired. The texts do not describe periods of high motivation followed by periods of rest. They describe a schedule, an unbroken, season-independent, mood-independent schedule. Dawn, practice, without negotiation. Not because warriors did not have bad days. Not because the body never protested. Not because there were no cold mornings when the mat looked like the worst place in the world, but because the practice was not dependent on the morning's emotional weather. The system showed up regardless. And over time, the practitioner stopped consulting their feelings about whether to show up because the consultation itself had been eliminated from the architecture. Hey, take a slow breath. Relax your shoulders. Release your jaw. Sink deeper. James Clear, in his landmark work on habit formation, identified a central principle that the warrior traditions had been demonstrating for 1,000 years. The system is the goal, not the outcome. The system. When your identity becomes, I am someone who trains at dawn, rather than I want to get stronger, you have made a shift that changes everything about the trajectory. Because goals exist in the future, and the future is always uncertain. The future can be delayed, disrupted, rationalized away, but the system exists now, in this morning, in this session, in this choice made today. That is independent of whether the goal is close or far, or even currently visible. The system is how the warrior kept training through years of peace when no battle was coming, through seasons of doubt, through the plateaus where progress was invisible, through the mornings when the only reason to continue was that continuing was simply what they did. Identity sustained what motivation could not. Let me give you the architecture of a system that works. It is not complex. The most durable systems never are. First, anchor the practice to a time, not a feeling. Dawn is not arbitrary. It is the time before the world makes demands. Before the day generates its 1,000 reasons to postpone. The practice happens at dawn because dawn is before the negotiation begins. Second sequence, not improvisation. Each session follows the same order, not because variety is the enemy, but because the deliberate removal of decision from the practice eliminates one of the primary friction points that prevent starting. You do not decide what to do. You arrive and begin. Third, minimum viable commitment. On the hardest days, the practice happens at its most reduced form. 40% duration, 60% intensity. But it happens because presence is the non-negotiable, not performance, presence. The warrior who trains at 40% on a broken day is building something the warrior who skips the broken day never builds. They are building the identity that shows up regardless. That identity is the fortress. Everything else, every skill, every capacity, every achievement, is built inside it. Your system is your structure. Choose it with the seriousness it deserves. Chapter 8. The Shadow of Softness. There is something we need to face together. Not to make you feel bad, but because the facing is where the freedom begins. In Jungian psychology, the shadow is the unintegrated self. The parts of you that have been denied, suppressed, labeled as unacceptable, and pushed below the surface of conscious identity. They do not go away when pushed. They become the force that undermines you from below. For most people in the modern world, the shadow of softness is this, the deep, private knowledge that you have been treating yourself too gently. Not cruel, not self-punishing. Gently. That you have accepted explanations for not beginning. That you have made the ceiling comfortable. That you have built a very sophisticated architecture of reasonable postponement and called it strategy. This is not self-criticism. This is self-honesty. And self-honesty is the beginning of every real change. Because you cannot forge what you cannot see. You cannot transform what you will not acknowledge. Take a slow breath. Relax your shoulders. Release your jaw. Sink deeper. The warrior traditions had no interest in shame. Shame is not useful. Shame closes, contracts, diminishes. What the traditions demanded was something different, clear seeing. The teacher who watched Koichi in the courtyard did not shame him, did not tell him he was weak, did not catalog his failures. He said, "You have built a beautiful roof, but there is no house." That is not condemnation. That is instruction. Precise, honest, and entirely forward-pointing. The shadow of softness is not the enemy. It is simply the current state. The baseline from which the forge begins. What matters is this: do you see it? Not with guilt, with clarity. Can you look at the places where you have treated yourself with excessive gentleness? Where you have lowered the standard, accepted the explanation, chosen comfort over construction, and simply say, yes. This is where I have been. This is not where I am going. That clear seeing is worth more than any technique or protocol, because it changes the relationship between you and the pattern, between you and the history, between who you have been and who you are in the act of becoming. The shadow of softness dissolves not through willpower, but through evidence. Evidence that you can hold the chi, ishi past the burning. Evidence that you can strike the makawara on the cold morning. Evidence that the system shows up regardless. Each piece of evidence is a vote for a new identity. Each session is a data point in a new story your nervous system is telling about you. And eventually, not through one dramatic breakthrough, but through accumulation, the new story becomes louder than the old one. The old voice that said comfortable. The old voice that negotiated. The old voice that built reasons to stop. It does not disappear entirely. It diminishes into the background, into the shadow where it belongs. And in the foreground, the clear, steady voice of the person you have been building. I am the one who continues. I am the one who shows up. I am the one who builds the house. Chapter 9. The integration a day built like a warrior's. Let us come now to the concrete, to the lived practice, to what the warrior's approach actually looks like in a day. Because philosophy without practice is decoration, and the principles you have absorbed through this book require a container. A structure, a daily architecture that makes transformation not aspirational but automatic. The traditional schedule was not born from rigid dogma. It was born from an understanding of how the body and mind work across the arc of a day, of when the nervous system is most receptive to demanding training, of how rest and intensity interact, of why sequencing matters as much as content. What follows is not a prescription. It is a template, an architecture you adapt to your life while preserving its essential logic. The essential logic is this: forge the vessel first, then fill it with technique. Build the foundation before the structure. Train the capacity before the skill. Everything else follows from that principle. Take a slow breath. Relax your shoulders. Release your jaw. Sink deeper. Hin before dawn. The preparation, the warrior's morning, began before the practice. Not in motion, but in stillness, in the deliberate transition from sleep to presence. The body fully woken, the nervous system brought to a state of focused calm before any demand was placed upon it. 5 minutes of complete stillness. Sitting, eyes closed, not meditating in a formal sense, simply arriving, inhabiting the body that is about to be asked for everything. This is not optional. This transition, from the diffuse state of morning to the focused state of practice, is a practice in itself. It trains the capacity to shift states deliberately, a capacity that becomes extraordinarily valuable in every area of life. Early morning. Foundation work. The first work of the day was always grip and impact conditioning. The most foundational, the most unglamorous, the most honest. 30 minutes of chi. Ishi work, the weighted implements, the deliberate twisting, the progressive engagement of the forearms, wrists, and deep stabilizing structures of the hand. Beginning light, increasing through the session, ending at the edge of voluntary capacity. Followed by Makawara work, beginning with controlled strikes. Not power strikes, but precision strikes. Building the neural pattern before the intensity, then escalating. Volume before power, pattern before force. This sequence is deliberate. Grip work prepares the connective tissue. Impact work, done after the tissue is warm and the neural pathways are primed, builds density without unnecessary injury risk. The session ends not at failure, but at approximately 80% of maximum capacity. This is crucial. Training to absolute failure daily does not build more strength. It builds more injury. The warrior needs to train tomorrow and the day after. The 80% rule preserves that capacity. Mid-morning, technique and endurance. After the foundational work and a period of active recovery, the mid-morning session turns to technical practice with endurance demands. The tetsubo forms, the heavy kata, the movement patterns performed with weight that demands attention, that makes every transition meaningful, that removes the luxury of mechanical repetition and installs instead conscious presence in every moment of the form. This is where technique meets foundation, where the principles absorbed in the morning's conditioning work express themselves in complex movement, where the body, already educated by weight and repetition, receives the patterns of refined skill. 45 minutes. No rushing. No shortcutting. The form is the teacher. Respect it. Afternoon. Power and application. The afternoon session is where everything integrates under true load. Heavy carry workstones, sandbags, or whatever implements the practitioner has access to. Carrying heavy objects across distance. Lifting, lowering, walking while loaded overhead. Not for aesthetics. For the specific, irreplaceable experience of the body working under total demand, and then full sparring. full application. Everything theoretical becomes tested. Everything built in isolation meets the unpredictability of another human being also fully present. This is why the previous 3 sessions matter. Without the foundation built in the morning, the afternoon becomes survival. With it, the afternoon becomes art. You will adapt this for your life. You will compress it, modify it, translate its principles into whatever form your specific existence can sustain. But hold the logic. Forge the vessel first, foundation before technique, capacity before application, and show up tomorrow and the day after. The schedule is not the point. The consistency is the point. The day built like a warrior's is not built once. It is built and rebuilt morning after morning until it stops being a construction and becomes simply how you live. Chapter 10. Identity Installation. Eve. Embodied Identity. We have arrived at the deepest layer. Everything you have absorbed in this book. The philosophy of the gate, the science of ossification, the practice of grip and impact and repetition, the architecture of grit, the daily system, all of it has been building toward this. Not what you do, who you are. Identity installation is the final and most powerful stage of the F.O.R.G.E framework. And it is, paradoxically, where most transformation work begins instead of ends. Most systems start here. They tell you to believe you are disciplined before you have built the evidence. To affirm your strength before you have tested it. To visualize your future self before you have taken a single step toward them. This is backwards. And it fails, not always immediately. Sometimes affirmation and visualization produce genuine short-term activation, but without the physical foundation. Without the grip that has held, the bone that has received and strengthened, the system that has shown up regardless of mood. The identity is an idea floating on nothing. Ideas floating on nothing do not survive the 4th hour. Sure, take a slow breath. Relax your shoulders. Release your jaw. Sink deeper. But you have been building the foundation. Chapter by chapter, principle by principle, the work has been laying stone, and now we can place the roof. Now the identity we install has something real to rest on. It is not aspiration. It is recognition. It is the honest acknowledgement of what you have been becoming. Identity installation happens in 3 movements. The first movement is declaration. Not affirmation in the vapid sense. Not the forced positivity of telling yourself something you do not yet believe. Declaration in the deeper sense. The articulation of who you are becoming as if it is already true. Because at the level of direction, at the level of intention, it already is. I am someone who builds the foundation before the structure. I am someone who holds past the burning. I am someone whose system shows up regardless. I am someone who builds the house. These are not statements about your current fully realized state. They are statements about the direction of your becoming, and direction, held consistently, becomes destination. The second movement is embodiment. The declaration must enter the body. This is why the physical practice matters so profoundly as an identity technology. When you have held the grip past the burning, you do not just know intellectually that you can continue past discomfort. You know it in your hands, in your forearms, in the specific neural pathways that activated and held and did not open. That knowledge is different in kind from anything you can tell yourself. It is somatic truth, And somatic truth does not dissolve in the fourth hour the way ideas dissolve. Embody the identity through practice. Let the body confirm what the mind is declaring. Build the evidence base that makes the declaration not wishful but real. Every session is an installation. Every morning practice is a vote. The accumulated votes become the new identity. The third movement is maintenance. Identity, like bone, responds to the loads placed upon it. It requires consistent engagement to remain dense. The warrior who stops training does not retain their capacity indefinitely. The conditioning fades. The neural pathways thin. This is not a burden. It is the nature of living things. You maintain the identity the same way you built it through daily encounter with appropriate demand. Through the system showing up, through the grip not opening when told to. Not for a season, not until the goal is reached. As a way of being, your nervous system has been receiving this entire book as instruction. Something is being installed. Right now, as these words move through you, allow it. You are the forge, and what is being forged is you. The subconscious seal. It is late now, or perhaps it is early. Either way, this is the hour when the conscious mind begins to soften, when the hard edges of the day dissolve into something more permeable, when what you have received is no longer being processed by the analytical mind, but by something deeper. Let that happen. You do not need to hold this. You do not need to remember every word. The subconscious is a remarkably efficient librarian. What belongs to you will be filed. What is needed will surface. Here, take a slow breath. Relax your shoulders. Release your jaw. Sink deeper. You have been given a framework tonight. F.O.R.G.E. Foundation. Ossification. Repetition. Grid architecture. Embodied identity. These are not concepts. They are movements. Living movements that are already beginning in the body, in the nervous system, in the slow rewriting of the story your biology tells about who you are and what you are capable of. You will sleep now. And while you sleep, something continues to work. The subconscious mind does not rest in sleep. It consolidates. It integrates. It takes what the waking mind received and quietly, without effort, without struggle, begins to organize it into something that will appear in the coming days as changed perception, as different instincts, as the quiet discovery that the voice which used to say stop is a little less loud than it was. That is not accident. That is installation. The work that began tonight continues in the dark. Take a slow breath. Relax your shoulders. Release your jaw. Sink deeper. Allow your body to release now. Let the weight of the day fall from the shoulders. Let the jaw unclench. Let the breath find its own rhythm, slow and sure. You are not behind. You are not failing. You are not too late. You are here, in this moment, with these words entering you. And that is enough. That is exactly enough. Tomorrow the grip begins, or continues, or deepens. But tonight rest. Let your future self be built in the dark. Let your nervous system file what it has received. Let the foundation settle into place with the patient certainty of stone. The house is being built. You are the builder. You are also what is being built. Sleep now, and wake as someone a little closer to forged. Leave this in the comments. I build the foundation first. I am forged. The gate is not the wall, it is the threshold, and you have always had the key.